We begin this Tuesday morning with the ongoing investigation into the apparent assassination attempt against former President Trump. He is set to host a town hall in Michigan today. That'll be his first public event since this past weekend's incident. The Martin County Sheriff's Office has released body cam footage showing the moment 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Ruth was taken into custody along I-95 on Sunday. He's accused of pointing a semi-automatic rifle towards the former president at his Florida golf course while hiding in the bushes. Ruth is now facing federal charges. Officials say the suspect did not fire his weapon and that Mr. Trump was not in his line of sight. Meanwhile, sources tell NBC News the Trump campaign has asked the Secret Service for increased security following the incident. The FBI says it's learning more about the suspect and his activity on Sunday.
We're continuing to conduct analysis and will be compiling the subject's movements in the days and months leading up to September 15th. Cellular data shows that the subject was in the vicinity of the golf course roughly 12 hours before the engagement with the United States Secret Service.
NBC News law enforcement and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter joins us here on set with the very latest. Tom, good morning. So Ryan Ruth made his first appearance in federal court yesterday in Florida. What are we learning about him, and tell us the charges he's now facing?
Well, I think a couple of things. First off, as it pertains to his activity leading up to that moment when the Secret Service spotted him with that gun and fired on him, apparently he had been in the bushes there and in that tree line since 1:59 a.m. Sunday. Flash forward almost 12 hours later, and 1:30 when he spotted his former President Trump is on his way to the golf hole that's right next to where he was hanging out. They found that information by finding the number to his WhatsApp, which he had posted on Facebook. So very much a 2024 type investigation. As far as his charges, there are 2 weapons charges, and I think they're just initial holding charges to be able to say, you know what, let's keep this guy in custody, let's get him off the street, and then be able from here on out work on that investigation as they described. What were his motives behind this, and could that lead to more charges? The FBI has been out pulling surveillance camera tapes, taking hard drives from businesses and saying, look, we need to piece together this guy's timeline, and that's the work they're doing right now.
Let's talk about the response from the Secret Service. The agency has faced scrutiny since that first assassination attempt just about 9 weeks ago or so. We are now hearing from the agency's acting director, say acting because somebody has resigned in the wake of that first attempt. Now Here we are. What do we know about the response? What more is being done to protect a former president? And should we take this as a lapse in security or not necessarily?
Well, they did find this person and they did stop them from firing on Donald Trump. But I think in the near term, there's an immediate staffing concern as far as how are we going to add additional agents? How are we going to be able to start to make sure that there are no future incidents involving Donald Trump? Congress could pass a law today, and Savannah, you and I both know they're not going to be able to train agents and get them out in the street fast enough. But I think long term, there's now a bit of a sea change at the Secret Service, and the acting director talked about that yesterday.
Coming out of Butler, I have ordered a paradigm shift. The Secret Service's protective methodologies work, and they are sound. But the way we are positioned right now in this dynamic threat environment, it has given me guidance to say, you know what, we need to look at what our protective methodology is. We need to get out of a reactive model and get to a readiness model.
What the acting director is effectively saying, we're going to rip up parts of this playbook. And instead of us being in a position of we see a threat, we'll move whoever we're protecting, a president, a vice president, a candidate, we need to be out there a little bit more on the front lines. What do we need to be doing to push people back, to make a larger perimeter and be a little bit more aware of what are seemingly an incredibly high level of threats to all the candidates for this election?
Oh, so much to watch for here. We know you'll stay on it. We'll keep talking to you about it. Tom Winter, thank you very much. Okay. Let's turn now to our other top story. Rapper and music mogul Sean Diddy Combs is in federal custody this morning after he was arrested at a New York hotel last night. Authorities say his charges will be revealed later today when the indictment's unsealed. The arrest comes 6 months after Diddy's homes in Los Angeles and Miami were raided by federal agents. You might remember that, part of an investigation into allegations including sex trafficking. Combs has also been recently hit by a string of civil lawsuits accusing him of sexual assault and illegal distribution of guns and drugs. He denies all the allegations. NBC News correspondent Julia Ainsley joins us now to talk more on this. Julia, good morning. So first, just walk us through how the arrest unfolded last night, what we know this morning about what happened.
What we know, according to his lawyers, Diddy voluntarily returned back to New York because they were expecting a grand jury to issue this indictment that would lead to his arrest. He was at the Park Hyatt Hotel in New York City, where he was arrested around 8:30 p.m. last night. Now, he was arrested by Homeland Security Investigations. They're the investigative arm under ICE. Also another reason why I'm talking about Diddy, because I cover Homeland Security, in case you were wondering how I got into this. Homeland Security has been looking into Diddy basically for the last 6 months, at least that we know of. Even earlier, they were the ones who executed the search warrants in Miami and Los Angeles in March, and they've been doing this under a search warrant that was given to them by the Southern District of New York. So we can expect more details today to come from the Southern District here in Manhattan. But a key part of why it's important that Homeland Security Investigations was running this is to remember that this could have some international implications. We expect, based on what his lawyer said, that he might be charged with racketeering and sex trafficking. If there's any indications that that sex trafficking came from outside the country, that could bring up and make this even more serious. But already he's looking at possible racketeering charges, sex trafficking, as well as those civil lawsuits that accuse him of physical and sexual abuse.
Julia, first of all, you could cover anything and everything that you feel, so no questions there, but thank you for the explanation. Now, remind us the details here, the allegations he's been facing, the lawsuits against him.
Yeah, let's walk through the timeline, Savannah. So late last year, a former girlfriend of his, known as Cassie, filed a lawsuit that was quickly settled, but she accused him of physical and sexual abuse. Then 3 other women came forward accusing him of sexual abuse during their relationships with him. 2 of those women were teenagers. And then all of a sudden, there was this big day in March. We can remember there was property searches of his homes in Miami and Los Angeles. We saw investigators walking out with electronics. And then Diddy's phone was taken when he was in Miami and an airport on his way to the Bahamas. There was a lot of interest in his communications. So it went beyond what happened in his relationships. People started to look at whether or not he was actually organizing what looks like sex trafficking. And that's really been the allegation at the heart of this now. It went beyond sexual abuse in relationships. And so we can expect today, based on what we saw from the U.S. attorney putting out on X last night, that they're going to move to unseal this indictment today. So we'll be able to look page by page about what investigators had, what the grand jury did decide to indict him for, and try to get a clearer picture of where Diddy stood in the middle of all of this potential sex trafficking and racketeering.
Julia, I'm going to ask you to tell us how Combs and his legal team are responding to this arrest. I know we have a full statement. I do have a question, though, about it after you read it, which is part of it says in there that he is not criminal, is part of what they are claiming. And I guess just for people who feel like there's been so much news around him, so many different accusations, now he's arrested. We saw those raids. One thing that we all saw with our own eyes was security footage from a hotel that dealt with Cassie and that accusation that you saw there. And assaulting somebody is a crime. So I guess I'm wondering, in light of their response that you're going to read to us, how we're supposed to take that, if there really is any room for a defense here that you could see.
It's a really good conversation. I'll read you the statement and then let's talk about that. His lawyers putting out last night, we are disappointed with the decision to pursue what we believe is an unjust prosecution. He is an imperfect person, but is not criminal. Please reserve your judgment until you have all the facts. These are the acts of an innocent man, nothing to hide, and he looks forward to clearing his name in court. Now, often we see, Vanna, that people, celebrities, people with the kind of prowess of Diddy hire very good lawyers. And most of the things that they will say is that, this is an imperfect person, sure, but their name will be cleared in court. That's really hard, though, in the age of social media, when you're talking about the video like the one you've seen, where it looks really clear to an observer that he is abusing someone. And so it's hard to get past that. I will say we've even seen his lawyers try to take to that same messaging platform using using TikTok to go through visuals, go through criminal complaints, explain to viewers why they think he is still innocent and why all of this is a conspiracy against him. We should also say that those lawsuits that were filed, especially the one from Cassie, was done when New York opened a window for people with previously what would have been expired complaints to come forward. And so these are part of the arguments that we'll hear from his lawyer. But you're right, it's hard to make arguments about someone's innocence in an age when we're looking at videos.
Absolutely. Julia, you are great on reporting at Diddy. We appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. We know you'll stay on it. Well, parts of North Carolina are under a state of emergency this morning as after a strong post-tropical cyclone dumped more than 18 inches of rain along the coast. Multiple roads have either collapsed or closed, according to officials. People had to be rescued from their homes and cars because of the flooding. The floodwaters were up to 3 feet deep in some areas that forced schools and offices to close. The National Weather Service in Wilmington described the impact of the storm as a once-in-a-thousand-year flood. Terms like that we are hearing a lot more often. Let's get a closer look at the severe weather in the South with your Morning News Now forecast. Angie Lastman is in studio with us. Hey, Angie, good morning.
Hi, Savannah. Good morning to you. Unfortunately, what you just described is those really incredible rains across the Carolinas and parts of the mid-Atlantic. They're still prompting these flood alerts that are going to be up likely through the rest of the day. We've got still 6 million people included in that. Charlotte, Cape Hatteras, Virginia Beach, Richmond, all included in that. And we potentially could see these expand into other parts of this region here as the day goes on. What's left over, those remnants of potential tropical cyclone 8, continue to move a little farther inland and taking with it all of that moisture. So that means folks across, especially the central Appalachians, you'll see some good amount of rain working through that region. The potential for flooding will be there, specifically in portions of southeast Virginia. That's one of the spots that we're going to watch closely as the day goes on for some more of that rain. Then as we get into tomorrow, much of that moisture lifts to the north. We'll see this coastal low kind of hang out. That's going to bring us the chance for the prolonged rain across the Northeast. It'll see sections of basically New York to Washington, D.C., leaving us with a bit of a difficult commute tomorrow at times. Soggy conditions in the picture. And you guessed it, a chance for some flooding. Here's where we're watching the flood concern today. Richmond to Norfolk, we have a slight risk, but it does include Asheville stretching out to Cape Hatteras and Roanoke as well. Raleigh still included in that as we kind of start to see the rain wind down in that area. But we could still pick up a little bit more. So not going to be surprising through Thursday if we get anywhere from another 3 to 6 inches across this region. It'll be something to watch. And then that'll stretch again up into the Northeast for tomorrow. So we'll need our umbrellas in that region. Meanwhile, how about this warmth? I mean, it feels like summer in some spots. Rapid City into the 90s. Minneapolis running 15 degrees above normal for this time of year. We've got 86 on tap there. Chicago, too. Even Cleveland a little above normal as well. And this kind of warmer than normal trend continues into tomorrow, too. Now, if you're looking for some cooler air, or I guess slightly cooler is what we should say, by the time we get to the end of the work week and maybe into the weekend, we'll see things kind of winding down back into those 70s on Thursday and Friday in New York, but the upper 70s. And then look what happens by Saturday, Savannah. We get to those low 70s, a couple of 80s still left over across that region, but it'll feel a little bit better for folks there.
There we go, heading into fall. Angie,
Indeed.
thank you so much. In a little bit. Well, Texas community is on edge after a natural gas pipeline exploded near Houston yesterday. The blast sent a tower of flames into the air that could be seen at least 10 miles away, forcing nearly 1,000 homes and businesses to evacuate. NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson has the details.
An explosion of flames consumed the skies in Deer Park, Texas, after officials say a natural gas pipeline erupted. What do you remember of
The boom. I mean, it was a loud explosion. It was a big fiery ball that went up to above those trees.
Behind Rosemarie Allen's home, flames and billowing black smoke. At least one firefighter has been injured, officials say. No word on how many structures may be damaged or destroyed.
A lot of the house structures that are adjacent to that are still catching on fire.
It keeps getting bigger.
Homes, schools, and several businesses ordered to evacuate. This video showing just how close the flames were to shopping centers. Students at nearby San Jacinto College forced to shelter in place.
It was just scary because I was like, mate, what if it explodes again?
The cause of the inferno remains under investigation, officials say. The owner of the pipeline, Energy Transfer, saying in a statement an unknown car may have hit a pipeline valve. Officials say they've turned the pipeline off, but the community still on edge.
It'll be a while before it goes out.
Priscilla Thompson, NBC News, Deer Park, Texas.
The future of TikTok is in the U.S. is now in the hands of 3 federal judges after lawyers for the social media platform and the Justice Department argued their case before a federal appeals court yesterday. Now the judges have to decide if forcing the platform to sell or shut down is a violation of the First Amendment.
TikTok in court.
Save TikTok!
Getting its first chance to fight back against a law passed in April that could essentially ban the app in a matter of months. The government's concern that its Chinese-owned parent company could secretly influence Americans by manipulating what content is seen and exploiting user data.
The problem is that that same data is extremely valuable to a foreign adversary trying to compromise the security of the United States.
In heavily redacted court documents, the Justice Department and a senior U.S. intelligence official say they don't have direct evidence that China has used TikTok for propaganda in the U.S., but they say there is significant risk that could happen. TikTok arguing that's not enough.
They don't claim anything has happened yet. They claim there's future Chinese control, and therefore we can burden in a very significant way the speech of a U.S. entity and its users.
The judge is appearing sympathetic to claims from TikTok and a group of content creators that the law violates the First Amendment, but they pushed lawyers on why those protections should apply to a foreign-owned company. Right now, the app, used by 170 million Americans, is on the clock. If TikTok loses in court, it would have to sell to an American company by January, or it would face that effective ban.
Now, lawyers involved in the case have asked the judges to give their decision before early December. It really could come in just a matter of weeks. Legal experts say the Supreme Court is likely to decide whether to hear arguments on any appeal in the case, which is likely, before that ban is set to take effect in January. That could put any potential ban on hold for who knows how long, maybe even years. Let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas for more on this. Danny, good morning. Good to have you with us. We've had many conversations about this. So after more than 2 hours yesterday of oral arguments, which was about what was expected between both TikTok and the government, it's still unclear, of course, how the judges will rule in this case. Sometimes they sounded a little bit sympathetic to TikTok and this First Amendment case that they're making. But of course, it just all comes back to the Chinese ownership. What are the major takeaways for you?
First, when you're at a circuit appellate court like this, that is exactly what judges are supposed to do. You're not supposed to really know where they're leaning, and they're supposed to give each side difficult questions. And that's exactly what the judges did here at oral argument. This case involves a lot of really complex issues, but I think they can be boiled down to this. When Congress decides to act to protect the United States against a potential threat from not just any country, but a foreign adversary, what are the limitations? And can it override First Amendment concerns, not just for the U.S.-based entity, or I should just say a U.S. entity, but also for its users? What is the balancing test to be applied? According to ByteDance, they think it should be something that has long been known as strict scrutiny. It's a test that asks whether or not the legislation is necessary to achieve a compelling interest. And the practical effect of the strict scrutiny test that all law students are taught is that the government always loses. In other words, it's a test that is almost too difficult to meet the burden. So that would be a win for ByteDance.
The thing that struck me in covering this for a while is I have felt like when you hear the government arguing their case, it's almost like there is a smoking gun, but they want to keep it a secret because they're concerned about what revealing it could mean from a safety perspective, I suppose, from a national security perspective. And we got these court documents that I was able to go through yesterday. So much is redacted, but also importantly in there was a sentence where they basically just flat out said, we don't have any direct evidence that any of this stuff that we're worried about has actually happened yet, but they definitely make a compelling case that the risk is there, that the door could be open to that. What does that mean for their case? Like when you think about the judges aspect, not just people at home who are like, hey, I really like my TikTok, and if you haven't seen anything, I want to keep it. But does that say anything about the strength of kind of trying to prosecute TikTok?
Yeah, TikTok's argument is essentially that you didn't do this, Congress, for a good reason. The government's response is, sure we did. We have a lot of good reasons. They're right here in this paper. And TikTok's response is, yeah, all of this is blacked out. I can't read this. I don't know what's in here. We don't know what the threat is. And even the government concedes, well, there is no present threat, but there is a potential threat in the future from this foreign adversary, which doesn't even completely own the U.S. entity. And that's really what this case is going to boil down to is that enough? Now, we've had a lot of cases in which executive actions by agencies are challenged because the agencies don't give good reasons for their rules. But the court pointed out, this is not an agency. This is Congress. And Congress has considerable power to make its own findings and enact legislation. That's what Congress does. ByteDance, or TikTok's argument here, is that it just exceeded its boundaries, not only under the First Amendment, but I'm telling folks to watch this space on something called a bill of attainder. Congress cannot constitutionally just say, we're passing a law that Savannah is bad. And that's, I'm being glib, but that's really what the framers were concerned about, was legislative punishment, that Congress would just say, so-and-so is bad and he or she should be punished. And in a sense, ByteDance's argument, that's exactly what Congress did here. They didn't enact legislation that applies broadly to general foreign adversaries. They said, TikTok, you must divest or you're going bye-bye.
Right. A lot to walk through here, as
Yes.
I'm sure there's a pretty good chance, right, this ends up in the hands of the Supreme Court, should they decide to take it up. Danny Savalas, thank you so much. We'll keep talking about it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.